individual states often drop the ball majorly when it comes to reporting to the federal background check system when there are people that should not be getting guns because they shouldn't be able to pass background checks. We now have a story of sort of the opposite, which is the federal background check data or database not being used by states that are supposed to use it. This comes from Florida. We've just learned that there were hundreds of permits issued and thousands of people who applied for concealed carry permits in Florida who never had the background checks that were supposed to be done with the federal system, all because an employee of Florida state government couldn't log into the system. Florida's Inspector General did a report about this, the details of which we're only now learning. It's an employee of Florida's Division of Licensing named Lisa Wild. She quite literally just couldn't log into the system and do the background checks. And it took a very, very long time for anything to be done about it. In fact, it took a full year until March of 2017 for something at the Bureau of Licensing to be done once they realized that, hey, federal records weren't being reviewed by the Florida system. And the report that was released says that Lisa Wild was negligent in not sending over the background checks. And of course, everybody now is saying it's just Lisa Wild's fault, which to me is absolutely ridiculous. She was negligent because she should have communicated, hey, there's hundreds or thousands of these checks we're supposed to be doing and I can't log in. She should have done that. But how do you leave something of such importance? Who can legally have a gun, right? This is a really important issue. How do you leave that to a system that has no triggers or monitoring or something that would identify that, hey, the background checks aren't happening? And it is a much bigger problem than just Lisa Wild. And this is also stupid that people are writing to me and saying, David, do you believe that this was really an oversight? Don't you think that maybe this was a concerted effort not to do background checks? And I go back to, I forget who came up with this phrase originally, never attribute malice to that which can be explained adequately by stupidity. I know I'm slightly off with the wording and I don't remember who the quote comes from. There are some bits of information that might suggest that there was some deliberate looking the other way, but we don't actually have evidence that this was malice. It really appears to have been stupidity and a disastrous system. A few mitigating factors, because I know that there are people who will understandably be upset with me if I don't mention this, that make this slightly less bad than originally reported. Number one, there are other background check systems other than the NICS. You're supposed to use NICS, but you can still run other background checks as a state like the state of Florida. Number two, I do want to restate that this was for concealed carry permits specifically, not more generally for gun purchases, but for people who specifically wanted to concealed carry. And number three, after they learned about this, Florida did revoke 300 concealed weapons permits. So there are some slight mitigating factors here in terms of how bad this was. But how is I couldn't log in an even remotely acceptable explanation for anything related to guns for the period of a year? And I also am curious how Lisa Wild continued to work her job in good standing, given that this was going on. And I'm curious what her other duties were. The entire thing stinks. And this really goes back, you know, there's an argument that we hear from the right about gun safety regulations, which is we don't need more regulations. We just need to enforce some of the ones we have. And I completely agree with that, but we've seen no actual effort or demand from the gun fetishists to make sure that we are enforcing the gun safety regulations that we have. I'm fully on board with that. We have a ton of gun safety regulations that could mitigate some of the gun violence problem that we're having in this country. But the people who are saying no new gun safety regulations, enforce the ones that we have, are doing absolutely nothing to make sure that that happens. If I'm missing something on this story, if you think I'm wrong in my reporting and my criticism of what went on here, let me know. This story and all the other stories we talked about today are up for discussion on our subreddit at davidpakman.com/REDDIT. Quick break. Andrew Torres joins me next.